What's up everyone? Today I want to talk about one of the best Spiritborn builds for leveling in Season 7. And it is a fully poison build. Now we did see some buffs to poison abilities coming into this season, but that's not what makes this build so powerful. The reason it's so strong is the new seasonal mechanic, the witch powers. There are powers that not only give you poison damage, but scale that damage as well. So we have this really high amount of poison damage that just keeps going up and just keeps scaling higher and higher. I leveled from 1 to 60 in just a couple of hours, and everything on the screen just melts. You can just vortex everything in and melt it with one button. I'm playing this same build now at endgame with no uniques, virtually no tempering, virtually no greater affixes, and I'm still destroying everything in seconds. Okay, so let's quickly talk about how this build plays, the gameplay, and the mechanics behind it. So we have 3 ways of dealing damage, and they are all poison damage over time. Stinger is our core ability, which deals damage and makes enemies vulnerable. We have Scourge, which brings this centipede out and deals big AoE poison damage all around us. And then we have Touch of Death, which poisons an enemy, and then when they drop, they release swarms that deal more poison damage as well. Now, the best thing about this is, any of those will pretty much one-shot or deal enough poison damage to take down any mob while leveling. So all you're going to be doing is jump in or dash in from each pack, use the Vortex to bring them all in if they're a big pack, and then just drop your poison AoEs. Additionally, we have the Witch Power Decay Augmentation, and if your damage over time effects exceed 85% of target's life, they are instantly executed, which is why you see the poison build up and then the mob just vanish, because we deal so much damage that everything just gets deleted in seconds. So yeah, this build is very powerful. There's lots of other stuff behind it. We have barriers, we have these additional swarms. There's lots of different things that work into this build that we'll go through. So let's get into that in detail, starting with the skill tree. Okay, so on the skill tree, let's start from the top. Our basic ability, we use Withering Fist. This is basically a dash. We dash to our target, which saves us having to take a mobility skill. Then we take Enhanced, which gives us Vigor for each poisoned enemy, which is pretty useful. Our main ability here is Stinger. This is our big AoE poison. Then we take our Enhanced, apply 60% as poison over 6 seconds to all enemies. And finally, Advantageous. This basically makes our enemies vulnerable. So we 5 out of 5 that. Then we take this entire cluster here. 3 out of 3 for Vigorous for Vigor generation, 3 out of 3 for Balanced Exertion for increased damage from core skills, and then 3/3 Velocity for increased Vigor while moving. This just means that as you're going from pack to pack, you don't have to rely on your basic to generate your Vigor. Onto the next section, we take Vortex. This is how we pull all our enemies in and prepare them for our big AoE. We take Enhanced, so that this empowers the next ability, so after we've sucked them in, we deal more damage. And then we take Measured. While you have an active barrier, which we have a lot of in this build, which we'll discuss, you deal more damage, which we don't really care about the damage part, but it knocks enemies down. And we have a lot of things in this build which scale against crowd control enemies. This is a way to prep all our enemies with a crowd control. Then we take 1 point in Focal Point and 3 points in Apex for increased damage to vulnerable enemies, 9%, doubled on elites. And we've already said that our Stinger, makes enemies vulnerable. So we have that combo there instantly. Okay, down here to our defensive, we take Scourge. Call forth a wave of insects. This is basically our big centipede that comes out of the ground and spews poison damage on everybody and fears them and slows them. Again, setting up more crowd control. We enhance it. Each time you hit an enemy, you deal increased damage to crowd controlled enemies. And there it is. For 6 seconds, up to 50%. And there is a way, which we'll talk about in the aspects, where we can use this repeatedly. So it has an 11-second cooldown, but we can repeat this over and over and over again, really stacking up to 50% in just 3 or 4 uses. Down here, we take Reinforced, give 60% of your max Vigor over 6 seconds, meaning we can constantly use our abilities. We take 1 point into Anti-Venom and 3 into Nourishment. Healing increases your poison damage. We take 1 point in Patient Guard, so we get 3 in Auspicious. 3% of your max life as barrier every second up to 30%, which is really good with the barrier stuff we talked about up there. I think it's this one here. While you have a barrier, you knock down enemies. Fantastic. Okay, down into the next section, into potency, we take the Touch of Death. This strikes an enemy, infects them, and deal poison damage. When it expires or they drop, a swarm hatches and seeks other enemies, dealing more damage. These swarms work really well when you're doing things where you have to stay in one place. So things like the new events, the headhunter events, things like that, they work really well in there. They work well on bosses. These are really good for single target or stationary events. Down here we take Enhanced, so it also heals you. And then we take this down here, Invasive. The swarm bursts every second, applying 30% of its base poison damage over 6 seconds to surrounding enemies. This is massive. Over here, we take 3 points in Ravenous. Your centipede skills deal 12.5% increased damage, double it against healthy enemies, which is how we have this massive initial burst of poison damage. And then 3-3 for oppressive, deal 12% damage to crowd controlled and 30% increased crowd control duration. And we have a lot of crowd control already. And then finally, down at the bottom, let's talk first about our ultimate. We put 5 points into the Hunter. Now, we don't really care about the damage. You can see here the damage scales, but what we do care about is the cooldown. So with 1 point, we have a 41-second cooldown. With 5 points, we have a 33-second cooldown. So this just means we get this big leap more often. And the Hunter actually has a chance to reset our cooldown, so using it more often is really beneficial. We take Enhanced, overfills your ferocity by 4, increasing damage, and then finally Exalted. Defeating an enemy while the Hunter is present has a 40% chance to instantly reset its cooldown. This is massive, and that also resets our other cooldowns with one of our aspects. So really, really good ability. You can use others here if you'd rather go full poison and use the Devourer. Cool, but I think this works better. On this little section here, we want to work down to this bottom section here. So we go 1, 1, 3, so we can get Intricacy. When you cast an ultimate, the last different potency, defense, or focus skill you cast prior is reset and can be cast for free up to 3 times. So a really good combo you can do is you jump into battle with the Hunter. So you would use one of these already. So let's say you're using the Scourge. You'd use the Scourge, you jump into battle with the Hunter, and as you do that, you reset the Scourge. You can't just then use that once, you can use it 3 times. So you can go Scourge, 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 and that will ramp up your crowd control damage all the way to 50%. So it's a really, really good combo. You can also use it for resetting your vortex, things like that. So yeah, this is a really good combo that works well together while leveling. You can take 3 points in Spiritual, max vigor is increased, and then 1 point into Supremacy to trigger the ultimate bonus. So yeah, that's everything that I've been using. There's a lot of different synergies you can use here, and you could potentially get more defensive as you move into endgame. But while leveling, I had no problems. I've tailored this around quite a lot, and it's been fantastic. On the key passive, we go for Noxious Resonance. Your crit strikes cause your poisoning on an enemy to burst, dealing 100% poison instantly and 20% to surrounding enemies. That's how you see these, as you see the enemies with like a full green bar of poison damage, randomly they'll just be gone because we've just burst them. Really, really good damage. And damage is increased by 30% of your crit strike damage. I have no tailoring on my gear. My gear is terrible. I've just hit 60 on this, done the pit to unlock Torment, played a couple of Torments. I don't have anything in my Paragon board. I don't even have any glyphs in right now, nothing at all. I've got 124%. So once you start really working towards this, once you start getting more crit damage, this build will just fly. I think an endgame version of this is going to be very, very strong. But yeah, with nothing, it's still 124% damage. So yeah, that's the build, that's the skill tree. Okay, now onto the Spirit Hall. So on the Spirit Hall, if you've not played Spiritborn, you basically choose to align yourself with 2 different spirit types. So for the first one, I went with Gorilla. Casting a Gorilla skill deals thorns damage to enemies. We don't care about that, but it grants a barrier for 5% of life for 3 seconds. All skills are now Gorilla. So ignore the thorns part, but we have things that scale with barrier, and we don't really have any defensives. So barrier is like our main defensive, and it is literally all we need while leveling. Turning everything into Gorilla as well lets us use an aspect that gives us bonus damage when we use Gorilla skills. So I think this works really, really well in this poison build. The second one is more up to you. This is more preference, I would say. I went with Eagle. For every 4 meters you move, you gain crit strike, and it's reset afterwards. You could definitely choose some other ones here. You could potentially go for this one where you heal for nearby poisoned enemies. And there's a lot we can do in our Paragon board around healing and poison enemies. I think this could be very potent at endgame, but while leveling, I just went for a little extra crit. There's not really anything that really packs a punch while leveling, so I wouldn't stress about that too much. Okay, now let's talk about the gear and the aspects you want to be looking for. This season is throwing gear at you. You can go into these new zones, these new seasonal events, and just walk away with an inventory full of legendaries. So getting these aspects is really easy. However, this build does not rely on a single aspect to work. This build works perfectly fine with 0 aspects. So everyone you get is just more damage. So let's get into the aspects. So if I pop this open, I've got a full guide for this, which is probably easier to show you because you can see them all named like this rather than having to highlight each piece of gear. So this is the full guide. It's got the skill tree, Paragon Board, the the hotbar, everything like that. So let's go through it. I'll zoom in a little bit. So on the top, aspect of the protector, damaging an elite enemy grants you a barrier. We've talked about all the good benefits of having a barrier and the things that scale off of barrier, like I think Vortex does. So yeah, this is a good one. Then menacing. Scourge constantly affects enemies around you for up to 9 seconds. This is when you see the big green circle, when we use Scourge, that means we're kind of carrying that Scourge damage with us, which is really nice. On the gloves, infestation, lucky hit, centipede skills have a 35% chance to spawn a pestilent swarm, dealing poison damage, which is fantastic. We also have pestilence on our weapon. Stinger spawns a pestilent swarm at its target's location, dealing Stinger's base damage per hit. Pestilent Swarm now lasts 50% longer and spiral outwards. So this is how we're getting two combos here that give really good damage. If there's nothing else that you imprint on your gear while leveling, it would be these two. Pestilence on your weapon and then Infestation somewhere. Then we've got aspect of shared misery. When you hit a crowd controlled enemy, there is up to a 55% chance for that to spread to other enemies. Crowd control works really well in this build and gives us more damage. Okay, then we have aspect of soil power. So lucky hit, 25% chance to gain a mystic circle, casting a centipede skill in the circle, empowers them to apply poison damage over time. Fantastic. Over here we take binding morass. Close enemies or those you deal indirect damage to are slowed. Another crowd control, and you deal increased damage to slowed enemies, which is great. Insatiable. Defeating an enemy extends the duration of your active touch of death. Swarms by 2.2 seconds. When a swarm is replaced, it bursts, dealing up to 300% of the damage it would have done. Massive damage. Another way we can just one-shot a pack of enemies. Aspect of unyielding hits. Finally, casting a gorilla skill increases your weapon damage by 30% of your armor. Maximum 1,500 bonus weapon damage. Why does this work? One, because of this thing here, because of our primal spirit, we turn all of our skills into gorilla skills. So every single one of these, when you're in game, I'll show you in game. When you are in game, if you hover over a centipede skill here, you can see Stinger as a core skill, a centipede skill, and a gorilla skill, which means that this thing here will trigger any of your abilities to proc this effect. So yeah, really, really good. And the thing about having more armor, we can slam a bunch of skulls in our jewelry to get that extra armor. So yeah, this is all of the aspects I'd be going for. While leveling, I wouldn't touch tempering. I didn't temper a single thing while leveling and still managed to defeat everything effortlessly with one ability. So don't stress about tempering. Now I'm at endgame. I'm going to make a full endgame version of this, and I'll have it here. You'll have like a variant here, and you can jump to like the endgame version, and I'll show you all the tempering and all the stats to roll on your gear, things like that. But while leveling and doing early endgame, you don't need any of it. So yeah, this is a very, very smooth build that requires very little downtime to work on your upgrades. Okay, now let's talk seasonal mechanic, the witchcraft powers. And you don't get all of these at the start of the game. You don't start with all of these available. So I'll just show you the ones that you can get while leveling, the ones I would recommend while leveling. So like there's no point saying, oh yeah, get Piranado, because you don't have it until endgame. So this is what I'd be going for. As your main ability, I would go for Doom Orb. Doom Orb is just really good consistent damage. It spins around you, deals fire damage to anyone that touches it. That's good because we suck everything in with Vortex. We have a lot of enemies around us to do that too. Additionally, as you defeat enemies or attack bosses, this can proc a big pop of additional damage where it reforms after and the cycle continues. I tried the cycle which deals poison damage and it just didn't do enough damage. It wasn't reliable enough. I honestly think this is significantly better. On the lesser powers, I would be going for these. Soul Harvest. Whenever you use a cooldown, you gain primary core stat per surrounding enemy. We have a lot of surrounding enemies. So that when you think we jump into a pack of 10, that is all counted as surrounding enemies, gives us additional prime stats. We go for Decay Augmentation. Your other witchcraft effects deal 30% of their base damage over 5 seconds as your mechanical damage over time. So think like bleeding damage on a warrior, burning damage on a sorceress, poison on this build. That's how I believe this works. So this is consistent poison damage. Once you've upgraded it as well a few times, you get this thing here. If your damage over time effects exceed 85% of the target's total life, they are instantly executed. Incredible for us, because we can apply pretty much a full bar of poison with one move. We take Twilight Warding. Every few seconds you gain a barrier. Another source of barrier is fantastic in this build. We go for Aura of Lament. The first time you damage an enemy, you lament them. That slows them for crowd control and gives you primary resource. And then finally, Aura of Siphoning. Deals poison damage to everyone around you, and if you upgrade it, that also heals us. This is not like a min-maxed endgame perfect setup for like max damage. Every one of these helps this build. Every one of these either deals more damage or keeps us more survivability. So yeah, definitely the ones I'd recommend. You can see I've tried quite a few, and these are easily the best ones. So if you've tried any others and you think they're better, do let me know in the comments, but this is what I would go with. Okay, now let's talk Paragon boards, and I'll show this on the build guide. So let's get the guide up, and if we go to Paragon board, this is a leveling guide, so don't stress too much about Paragon. You won't use this until you get to 60, but I wanted to make something so that if you get to 60 and you really like the build, you have something to start with. You have something to go off until, you get an endgame version of this, or you find something you want to move to. You can use this to play endgame for quite a while. So I've made, 3 boards to get us going, 100, nearly 200 points. So we'd start off here and we'd run it down the side, and you want to get both of these. Both of the sides of these come up to the middle, and you want to get the Bane glyph. For every 5 strength, you deal 16% increased poison damage. And poison has a 15% chance to deal double the amount. There's quite a few strength nodes here we can get, and there's lots of things like damage to elites and damage and just raw damage as well. So there's lots of good things in this first node. We leave and we come into this here. We go into sapping. I'd tilt it this way so you have the legendary node on your left and you can get it straight away. Come up to the legendary node. When you cast 3 gorilla, jaguar, or eagle, or centipede skills with the same spirit in a row, restore 15% of your vigor and deal 30% increased damage. As we've discussed, all of our abilities are gorilla, and the way this build plays, you can actually throw out 3 of the same ability quite easily. Okay, then I would run along here, get the resistances, come along here, get the attack speed upgrade, and come to the glyph and go for consumption. Every 5 in, your pestilent swarm deals more damage, and you deal 2% increased damage for each active swarm, and touch of death works incredible with this build, and there's lots of these nodes around here. Then I would come down to the next side and I would go for Vicious Shield. In Vicious Shield, I'd tilt it this way so that we can get the barrier generation. We could come along here and we would go for Fester. For every 5 dex, you deal increased damage with centipede skills, and your centipede skills deal increased damage to crowd controlled units. So yeah, this works well. There's loads of nodes here as well. You can throw a lot of points into here, and there's lots of other good stuff around. You can come and get more barrier generation, then wrap around, and you want to get the legendary node, Vicious Shield. 1% increased damage for each 3 of max life you have as a barrier. And I say this would be like the second board you add, so that you've got more time to work on improving your build by the time you get here to have more barrier. That's how I would start this. Again, not really needing a leveling build, but I want to give something to work with. And as we make an endgame build, I'll throw that in with a full Paragon board, gear descriptions, tempering, stuff like that. But hopefully this helps. Anything I haven't covered will be on the build guide somewhere. If you want to see the gems, things like that, that's going to be on here. But yeah, this is a good leveling build. You will fly through the game with this. I'm going to wrap it up here. That's it from me. I hope you find this useful. If you like this style of build, you want to see the endgame version, do subscribe to the channel to see more. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. That's it from me. Thank you so much. Take care, and I'll catch you in the next one.